Hey Switchheads, welcome back. Kanan here, and this is my review for Rise Eterna. And as usual, before we press on, feel free to hit that like and subscribe button. You know you want to, and it'll help the channel immensely as well. And to further get involved, come and join us in our community Discord, link down below. Come for the chat, stay for the streaming. And so let's find out whether this story-driven RPG turn-based game is, going to end up on the Wall of Fame, or maybe the Wall of Shame, or somewhere in the middle. Let's get on with it, shall we? Gameplay. Okay, so first of all, I like graphic novels, but there's one thing that I normally miss from actually just going through a graphic novel on the Nintendo Switch, is maybe a bit of gameplay between the actual storyline to kind of break it up slightly. Luckily enough, Rise Eterna has you covered there. First of all, the story is actually not bad as a whole. It does falter in certain bits. I'm not going to tell you everything about it, but for the most of the actual storyline, it's actually shrouded in mystery, and you'll end up doing things not quite knowing what the end product's going to be, but it does actually keep you going and interested in it as more and more characters are actually added. But as I said, it does have slight faults within it where, you kind of like think, would those characters actually do that or wouldn't they? But as a whole, it's not a bad story, and it's kind of like set up in chapters. But as for the actual gameplay is actually set up in stages and on this like rather large kind of map that unlocks itself as you go from place to place. Each place that you actually go to will like spark off another portion of the actual story, and then when you finish it will like present another bit of the story, and you'll also get in each actual level a kind of mission objective. You always have to keep these two characters alive, but you also get like finish all the actual enemies, or get to an exit, or something, along those lines. As I said before, as you progress, you'll be picking up other characters along the way, and you can start swapping them in and out as you actually progress far enough into the actual game. And basically, you can fit a total of 6 into your actual playable roster for every time you go into one of these battles. I was actually quite surprised by the actual size of these arenas that you go into. Not all of them look different, but they kind of like do change as you go along. It's in different areas, some forests and some not forests, and some have like lakes and things like that to them. But all in all, there is a core gameplay aspect here, and it kind of like sticks to that every single time you actually go into one of these. And so battling is actually turn-based, and it's kind of like most of the actual turn-based games out there. You have a grid, you kind of like go around, you have a certain amount of moves, enemies can actually move towards you, and it's taken in turns of actual individual characters and then swapped over to the enemy's turns, and if they're near enough to you, they will attack you or move towards you. Attacking is quite simple. You just either go up near to an actual character and basically attack them, or you actually, use things like bow and arrows and things like that, and some actual characters can use ranged weapons but not actual bow and arrows, more like a spear type thing where they can actually just reach across a couple of actual squares to get at an enemy. During battle, if any of your characters are actually close by each other, you actually help and kind of augment each character by having them surrounded by their other characters. Basically, it's kind of like a support mechanic, i.e. the more characters you have around you, I'm thinking the more damage you do because the more they're helping you. But it doesn't graphically show this, which is a bit weird, but I think that's the way it works. It's not a bad little mechanic, and it's something that you kind of like have to think about when you're actually in battle, because obviously you want to do the most damage, but you don't want to cluster up too many characters just in case the weaker ones get hit during the actual enemy's phase. So there's plenty of different tactics that you can actually, use within the actual game itself, and as you actually pick up more characters, that can change the whole way that you actually fight on the fields. And the same goes for your enemies. They have people with bow and arrows and spears and all that sort of thing, and they can do pretty well the same that your characters can do as well. Not to mention some actual tougher characters that kind of feel more like bosses of certain levels and certain progression parts. You also get to use potions, keys and things like that to heal your characters, but if one character's holding a actual thing to heal themselves, they can't heal someone else unless they're actually standing next to each other. So it's kind of like a around you field, and yeah, that kind of actually makes sense, doesn't it? Most of these levels also hold places where you can scavenge and also chests and things like that, but it is worth bearing in mind also that all these different things that you can collect, the chests and everything, can only be done whilst you're actually battling. So after all your enemies have died or you've fulfilled the objectives of the actual level, then you can't go back and basically pick up or round up all these things. So it's kind of almost like a risk reward type thing. Is it worth it, and are you having your ass handed to you? If you are, then maybe it's not worth going to grab it all. But if it's, you've defeated everyone, you've got one enemy left over, maybe go around and gather everything before defeating them. But also you must bear in mind the fact that there's things like traps as well. And these are things like spikes and, things to poison you and all sorts of different things to slow you down or just to do damage to you. The controls were a little bit fiddly to start with, not really complicated, more sort of just using them with the actual controllers, and there was no touch screen either, which probably would have helped a little bit. And after you really get into the game, the actual fighting kind of became a bit samey because I think to me the actual characters or the enemies didn't change as much as I would have liked them to, and I would have also appreciated a zoom button as well. I think that would have elevated the actual game slightly for me, as well. I think the only reason this didn't get boring for me was the fact that you keep changing between the story and the actual battling, and I think that actually kept it fresher for longer, and yeah, kind of stopped and broke up the game a little bit more than if you just had one or the other in some other games that I've seen. As you can see, when you're actually battling, each character has a character sheet, and that gives you your hit points and everything, and your attack range, and also your movement range, and your health obviously. And yes, all this can be put up and changed and everything in the world map area. So you've got a big menu here and it has different aspects to it. We've looked at the world map, and then you have the heroes you've collected, and here you can actually swap between them and swap in, swap out the actual characters you want to keep in battling. And then you've got the inventory, and these are things that you've collected during the actual battles or the things that you've actually crafted as well. We'll come back to that little nugget in a second. But as I touched on before, each character has their own actual inventory and their own actual items, and you have to be near to each other in order to swap these between characters or to use them with or to a character. And then there's your gem slots, which basically add and minus different stats. You can augment something like your health, but sometimes if you augment that, the gem will put down something else like your agility. So it's kind of matching these gems to actually what you need. So if you've got an archer, maybe they need less attack but more actual agility, so he can actually hit the enemy more often. And these things can be actually found on the battlefield through some of those searchable items and areas that I mentioned before, and you can unlock a couple more actual slots as you go along. And if you have surplus gems or just gems you don't want to use because of some reason, then you can also trade the gems in and get some crafting material back. And mentioning the crafting, we actually have a crafting mechanic here, and you can make potions, weapons, and things like keys and all under the misc. This is very useful obviously because you want things like health potions and potions that do damage, damage and like keys to open chests and doors during gameplay, so you don't need to go looking for them, which is, trust me, very handy. And lastly, you have your skill tree, which is basically unlocked every time you do a level. You gain a point, and yeah, you start unlocking the actual things, and there's like health, more damage, defense, and all sorts here, right down to things that can help regenerate your character from each turn, and like things that you can do more damage if you're all grouped together. All of these skills are useful, and as far as I can see, they kind of like go in a direction that you want to go in, so depending on how you actually want to play the game, you can basically make the characters how you want them to be, which is pretty cool. Graphically, it looks okay. It's kind of top down. As I mentioned before, I would have appreciated a zoom button because it kind of like makes everything look really small, and although it does have like little features, it's hard to actually see in handheld mode. When the actual characters are interacting, that's when you get the feeling that it's like a graphic novel type thing, and as I've mentioned before, it does really help split up the game and keep it like feeling like a little bit more fresh. Sound wise is my old bugbear. If it was all voiced, I'd be completely happy, but I do understand why a lot of people or devs don't put this into their games, and yeah, it's just my own bugbear there. All the other sounds are okay. They do they basically serve to what you want them to be doing on screen, and to me was nothing really special, but yeah, it served its purpose. The good. I do and am actually enjoying the story. The combat is not too difficult, but in depth enough that you actually don't get too bored of it too quickly. There are plenty of pickups and skills and everything to actually, augment your character with, and yeah, that also helps keep it fresh as well. The bad. No voiceover, but that's just me. Has got a tendency to get a little bit samey, which is a shame. A zoom in button would have been absolutely brilliant, and mentioning that, touchscreen would also, I think, would have augmented the game a little bit for me as well. The score. Remembering that these are my own personal thoughts on these games and my own score, and I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5, and a pretty high 3 out of 5. I think anyone that actually enjoys tactical games and turn-based games would really enjoy this, and it's not really priced too badly for the amount of gameplay you actually get from this. And I think anyone that's like me that likes like those graphic novels but wish there was something more to break up the actual reading bits here and there would probably really enjoy this as well. And as for my alternative, I'm going to be mentioning Demons Rise Lords of Chaos, which is another, turn-based tactical game where you have multiple characters to control. And I have played and reviewed this for the channel, and yeah, I enjoyed it enough to, recommend it. I did actually find it quite engaging, and there was plenty to actually do, just like this game. And so, what are your thoughts on Rise Eterna? Are you going to be picking it up? Is it your sort of game? Or are you going to leave it alone and, not bother? Leave it down in the comments, because that's where it belongs. And, if you've enjoyed this content, I know it's been a long one, this one, but, if you've enjoyed it, consider hitting that like and subscribe button, especially if it's helped you out in any way. And to get further involved, why not jump into our community Discord and, come for the streaming, come for the chat with great friendly people, because life is better when we switch together.